Bom dia a todos, sejam bem-vindos ao segundo dia da IELTS Week de 2024. Meu nome é Vanessa e eu estarei com vocês nesse evento organizado pelo British Council. Eu vou começar com a minha audiodescrição. Eu sou uma mulher branca, de cabelos escuros, eu estou usando o cabelo preso, um óculos com armação bege e uma camisa azul. Meu fundo é branco e dá para ver alguns livros ao fundo. Ontem nós discutimos temas muito interessantes sobre motivação dos alunos, e se vocês não puderam participar dessas sessões, eu recomendo que deem um tempinho para olhar elas tanto no canal do YouTube do British Council Brasil, quanto não, de Américas não, só no British Council Brasil. Um lembrete rápido sobre as nossas regras internas. A gente recomenda que vocês postem os comentários, as dúvidas de vocês no chat, mas sempre mantendo uma comunicação respeitosa e positiva. Se tiverem alguma dúvida sobre o certificado de participação, no final do evento, todos os participantes inscritos vão receber um e-mail com um link para o formulário de avaliação. Se vocês ainda não se inscreveram, por favor, a gente está botando o link de novo no chat, vocês podem se inscrever até o final da semana. E agora nós vamos estar acompanhados pela professora Thilanka Wijesinghe, que nos falará sobre a pesquisa do British Council Ser Professor com Deficiência, perspectivas, práticas e oportunidades. A Thilanka é uma fonoaudióloga especializada em atendimento comunitário e intervenções baseadas no Sri Lanka. O trabalho dela se concentra em melhorar os resultados de comunicação para crianças e melhorar o ensino primário para crianças com deficiência. Ela também é vinculada à Faculdade de Educação de Cambridge, no Reino Unido, e ao Departamento de Estudos de Deficiência na Universidade de Kelaniya, no Sri Lanka. A pesquisa de doutorado dela se concentrou na educação de surdos do Sri Lanka, e ela é uma das pesquisadoras da pesquisa Ser um Professor com Deficiência, Perspectivas, Práticas e Oportunidades, que se vocês quiserem baixar e dar uma lida na pesquisa completa, vocês podem no nosso site.
Hello everyone, I'm Thilanka Wijesinghe, a research associate at the University of Cambridge, Faculty of Education. And thank you for this opportunity. It is a privilege to present at the ELT Week in Brazil. And I bring to the table a topic of disability in employment, and an aspect that is often easily missed out or left out in discussions. So let me put on the screen and I'll start my presentation. I hope it's visible. So today I will be speaking or talking to you about a project that I took over, a project that was led by Professor Wijesinghe, and I was involved very centrally in this project with another colleague, Dr. Patricia Kaur. The project is focused on the experience of teachers with disabilities in mainstream schools across 5 countries. And my presentation today is under the topic of being a teacher with disabilities. So I will talk in this context, I will get as many as examples that I can get in the context of Brazil. But there are examples of 4 other countries in this presentation. So let me start with a story to set context. And here I choose a client or a participant from Brazil, and his name is Gilberto. Gilberto from Brazil is a teacher with 10 years of teaching experience. He teaches English and Portuguese at college level. Before beginning his teaching career, he worked as a social scientist for 6 years. He holds a certificate in teaching English to speakers of other languages, CELTA. Qualification has recently completed a master's degree in teaching. Gilberto was diagnosed with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder approximately 8 years ago. and this is also called ADHD. Prior to this diagnosis, he had experienced anxieties and difficulties in maintaining concentration or over extended periods of time. He was dismissed from a teaching position for speaking too slowly and spacing out. And additionally, he encountered challenges in attending to details. This once resulted in an unnoticed instance of bullying in his classroom. However, upon reflection, Gilberto expressed that this incident led to a fuller understanding of his condition and a desire to teach at a higher level. He then underwent a series of diagnoses in a local hospital in the hope of identifying the underlying cause for this inattention he felt. This once resulted in an unnoticed, given that ADHD is not a well-diagnosed disability in Brazil, even after the diagnosis, Gilberto did not disclose his disability to others at work. This is because he does not wish to feel that he is relying on some kind of crutches. He also prefers not to be limited to an identity of someone who has a disability. While he believes that his colleagues are generally helpful, he indicated that he has almost never asked for help. My limitations can impact other people's lives, he said. When reflecting on whether to continue hiding his disabilities, his uncertainties linger. One particular worry is that there is a stigma associated with adults who receive a diagnosis of ADHD. Gilberto mentioned that society tends to perceive these adults as using the condition as an excuse to be irresponsible or ineffective. On a practical level, he is also unsure how teachers with ADHD can be supported. So, you have to find ways. Society is like that, he says. Reflecting on his teaching experiences, Gilberto expressed a desire to continue with his own exploration of ways to remain self-sufficient, also that he could fit into society. He has rather minimal confidence or optimism that the system will change to accommodate the needs of teachers or people with disabilities. He finds teaching large classes in which he has to attend to and manage multiple events difficult. He prefers to teach in a more student-centered style, such as by inviting students to participate in interactive classroom activities and letting them organize learning based on their interests. However, his preference had led to frustrations felt by some students who find a lecture style of teaching more conducive to their learning. Recalling some harsh and negative feedback he received, Gilberto regrettably acknowledged that maybe I'm asking a lot from them, the students. Yet he has also struggled to identify a pedagogical style that will work mutually well for himself and the students. Addressing students' comments and his teaching needs, Gilberto discussed his usual compensation strategy for not offering as much direct teaching as expected in class. He asked students to submit more written work for him to provide individual feedback. As a result, compared to his colleagues, Gilberto feels that he knows individual students very well by their names, writing style, and handwriting. However, a dilemma remains. All the burden has fallen on Gilberto, who has to regularly work overtime to finish things such as marking, and he notes it feels really, really tiring. Gilberto raises that to better support teachers with disabilities, mindset and awareness remains the key. For him, formal diagnosis of disabilities is crucial, but this should not be a prerequisite for people to respect each other. When I talk about a diagnosis, there is a bureaucratic aspect to it. Like you need to have a paper to confirming that you are different to be treated respectively. Arguing for the need to see beyond the disabilities, Gilberto hopes that society can be more accepting of differences. So Gilberto was one of the participants from Brazil in our study. This research that I'm going to be focusing on today, this story is from this research. And this would be really nice for you to think from a perspective of a teacher with a disability. I will also put some context to what's available at the moment for teachers with disabilities. The official discourses in Brazil indicates that there is a Brazilian inclusion law, or the LBI, law number 13 of 146 in 2015. And the Article 37 of this law indicates a reservation quota of 2 to 5% of job opportunities for people with disabilities in companies with more than 100 or more employees. However, the level of compliance barely exceeded 50%. The employment to population ratio for persons with and without disabilities is 48% and 64%. So there is a difference. Women with disabilities are employed at a lower rate, that is around 25%, than women without disabilities or men with disabilities. Including the status of teachers with disabilities was not easy because most of the documents were in Portuguese, and in this study, most of the documents that we analyzed had to be in English. So to infer the status in Brazil for teachers with disability was not clearly possible in that sense. However, it gives us a context of what is going on at the moment. So I'll talk more about what we did in this project on how it sort of manifested. So 25 teachers working in mainstream schools across Brazil, Jordan, Rwanda, Spain, and Sri Lanka were included in this study. These were people who identified themselves as having disabilities. There were a range of different disabilities, starting from hearing impairment, visual impairment, physical impairment, and attention deficit disorder. What we did was we conducted semi-structured interviews and phone interviews, and a range of participatory methods were used, such as photo voice and photo elicitation. So, in order to get these participants, we sent out posters to the British Council organizations and other other people that we knew with the hope of recruiting these teachers. As you can see, this poster was sent out to Brazil, and then teachers responded to it. And in this, when you really think of why such research has been encouraged or has been carried out, the wider context that this research is based is something called the SDGs. I'm sure you are very aware of it, the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals forefront persons with disabilities across all the SDGs. But this research that we carried out focuses on the SDGs in Goal 4 on quality education. The focusing on disability, here the focusing was through that we focus on disability, taking on a lifelong approach, which I thought is very important. So we decided to focus on teachers with disabilities because there is so little research evidence available. Oops. Sorry. We argue that teachers with disabilities are currently important in building up an inclusive school culture and also focusing on teaching, opening up new ways of employment for persons with disabilities. Especially if we look at this graph, where countries of research that has been happening at the moment, it is really skewed and there is not enough literature. There are only about 44 research studies that's been done in this aspect. So based on what we found in this research, there were several key findings that we identified, and I will highlight a few of these from here onwards. And it will be very interesting to you, where I will discuss examples of examples that we got from all 5 countries, but I will emphasize a lot on the examples that we got from Brazil. So based on what we found, what are the key themes that are emerging is we wanted to find out what does being a teacher with a disability really mean? And we identified a few things. First is working at the periphery. Responsibilities and subject areas were having an impact. In our study, mostly in Sri Lanka and Jordan, teachers explained how they were not given the whole responsibility as a teacher, and also the subject areas they were functioning in were very restricted. For example, I don't have a timetable at present in my school. I now have been in the school for 7 years, 7 service years. Chandima from Sri Lanka gave an example. Next, the complacency at the level of the school management was another challenge reported. As a teacher in Rwanda stated, I was just considered like other people. So there were no changes or accommodations or any such thing made. They were considered as just another. And most shared accounts of supportive colleagues and students within the school. There seemed to be a temporal dimension with more older colleagues being less receptive or on this aspect, but with time and awareness, this understanding got better. Although the teachers with disabilities across the 5 countries clearly encountered challenges at policy, school, and wider society level, with little or no support, what shone through was their individual resourcefulness and their resilience. As Lucia from Spain captured, you always have to ask for everything, but you usually don't get anything. And as Gilberto from Brazil said, that he was always focusing on overcoming challenges. And as Ana Lu from Brazil mentioned, she was often committed to whatever she was doing. Despite the challenges, a powerful narrative of being a powerful role model for disability, powerful agents for change in classrooms and for the wider society emerged in different ways. As Pablo explained, students are inspired by us, whether or not they can identify directly. And as Mugisha from Rwanda explained, what I do, it will be a motivation for them, the students. So this is the being of a teacher with a disability. So not only being a teacher with a disability, but also the views of the doing. How they went about the teaching was also explored in this study. So during the teaching, being upfront. I mean, there were several aspects that sort of really sort of came up in this study, and being upfront about the disability was reported. As Pablo explained, I'm very open with them about my disability. And as Analu from Brazil similarly provide simple but clear instructions to students so that they were aware of her needs. She mentioned at the outset that you need to be loud, you need to speak up because I can't hear. So actually openly telling the students that there is a possibility of a difficulty like this was one of the ways that the teachers went about teaching. Another aspect that really came up was modifying the pedagogical or the teaching practice, such as giving a lot of assigned a lot of written work to the students and giving a lot of individual feedback after the class. For example, as Gilberto mentioned, including students. For example, when I describe an activity, students call out the page number. Was also indicated by Sanhit from Sri Lanka. Physical adaptations were also used in the teaching, such as, according to Ana Lu in Brazil, who has a hearing impairment. She relocated to classrooms that was less noisy. She noted that after discussions with the head teacher, the management were now aware of her need for a quieter classroom, so I can focus on the students well. Next, another important thing that came up was harnessing the potential of technology and assistive devices. 9 participants discussed how they harness the potential of technology and assistive devices. 3 teachers with hearing impairment across 3 contexts described the usefulness of hearing aids. For example, one said, my situation improved and I began to communicate well with my colleagues or with my students. The use of assistive devices such as hearing aids, not only hearing aids, ramps, crutches were also indicated. And in addition to the assistive devices, the availability of video conferencing platforms also enabled Anandu from Brazil, who has a hearing impairment, to adapt her teaching by transitioning from school to an online teaching platform. She found communication mediated by the online conference platforms more accommodating for her needs. So she drew a comparison between physical classroom and online teaching. And she mentioned, I can really focus and concentrate on the sounds. I keep speakers on and the aid of captions and subtitles, as well as seeing the faces clearly. Another technique that they were using, or another way that they really used in their teaching, was preparing materials in advance. And the teachers mentioned that they had all these things ready before they came into the classroom. This is, I mean, some of these things are very common. Teachers in general prepare for classes before they come to classrooms. But in these cases, where when you have a disability, preparing well ahead and getting all the materials into place was one of the things that they highlighted throughout. And that was something that they used as a common strategy to get over or get on with the teaching process. Another area that we really explored in this study with these 24 teachers was the experience of training and the progression in their career as teachers. The pre-service teacher training stage, in that sort of training stage, 20 out of the 25 participants reported receiving no specific support across the 5 countries. So as Asiri from Sri Lanka very clearly said, not even a single document was in Braille. So we had to get someone else to read. In the same way, another thing that really came up was 15 participants felt that due to their disabilities, they were unable to progress their careers or take on leadership roles. For example, Asiri again mentioned very briefly, there is no such a thing actually, that there is nothing called a career progression or in his eyes. And Amina from Jordan said some people are rejected because of their disability. Given these sort of teacher training related concerns as well, and not only in the teaching, but also in the training, we notice certain aspects that are really impacting a teacher with a disability. In these sort of interviews with all these teachers, another thing that we've really identified is what they recommended, what they recommended, or what they wanted as change. And I will highlight a few things which I think will be very helpful to understand the situation or see things through their eyes. So one of the recommendations was a respectful and an accommodating approach towards differences. And Gilberto in Brazil recommended a respectful accommodation approach towards the differences by saying, I think people don't need a diagnosis to be respectful and attentive to other people's limitations. People should be more accepting of differences. Similarly, in Spain, Lucia talked about the need for empathy. Others need to understand how you feel when you have a disability. So I thought these are quite powerful sort of things where they thought what they like people to think of or other teachers to think of. Moving forward and to encourage more teachers with disabilities, the other kinds of sort of changes that they really encouraged was inclusion must be a priority across the board, changing people's attitudes towards disability, improving the infrastructure maybe, because disability is not an inability, as mentioned by Ganza in Rwanda. Another thing that was really coming up was the need to improve the teacher welfare, particularly in addressing the additional costs that's encountered with significant concerns among teachers in Rwanda. Mandatory professional development programs to better prepare school leaders for supporting disability inclusion was another key theme that came up, where most teachers were commenting that the school leaders were not aware on how to get around disability inclusion for teachers with disabilities in schools. And another area that came up was disability inclusion should be a central part of training in pre-service and in service, and also upskill all teachers in using inclusive language and means of communication. So these were areas that the teachers were coming out. Investing in technological infrastructure to support teachers with disabilities. It was another theme which encouraging or emphasizing, saying that it will benefit all, not only the teachers with disabilities, but all teachers. The need and opportunities to share experiences and learn from each other was also seen as an area that really benefit and as a way of supporting, and also ways of supporting advocacy was another aspect that came up. It was interesting in this research where some of the teachers, I think the teacher from Brazil, one of the teachers, he said this was the first time that he actually discussed his disability with someone, someone about disability and his teaching or being a teacher. So I think these are also very important areas to sort of keep in mind, that not only just doing things or changing infrastructure, but also giving opportunities to share experience and to learn from each other and to support advocacy, so that the teachers can be included, teachers with disabilities can be included in much of the settings. So some of the key takeaways reflecting on these studies in the 5 countries, what I want to really communicate is inclusive education tends to focus on education of learners with disabilities, a lot on learners with disabilities, while inequalities in the teaching workforce itself are rarely recognized or addressed in the training, in the professional development, and career opportunities. So this is one of the things that teachers and others who are involved in this profession needs to take on board. Then researching with teachers with disabilities, teaching in mainstream schools across Brazil, Jordan, Rwanda, Spain, and Sri Lanka, many common themes are evident. So it is just not country specific. I mean, these themes are coming out across many of the countries, all 5 countries that we sort of explored in the 5 sort of continents. Such as some of the key themes that sort of really came across are lack of support from the management, where leaders not having the ability or the knowledge to maneuver this situation, and limited accommodations during teacher training was another thing. Where most of the time the teacher training was geared for teachers without disabilities. So then it became an issue to access resources or to actually access the teaching and the learning. The absence of accessible teaching and learning materials was another thing that sort of came across, and challenges in everyday functioning was another sort of area that was really discussed among many of the teachers from all over the 5 countries. While some cross-country variations are evident in the experiences, nonetheless, the absence of any robust national policies is indeed noteworthy. So in all 5 countries, not having the actual policies really clearly set in place was another thing that really came up. So research in these areas and was, as I mentioned, it was very limited. Apart from that, the actual policies set up to encourage teachers with disability was also quite impacted. Another thing that has sort of I would like to sort of bring up is the individual resilience and agency, coupled with strong perceptions of teachers themselves as agents of change, also emerges in the narratives of teachers with disability. And this is something that is very promising, even to us as researchers, when we were talking with these teachers. Even in so-called countries with strong disability advocacy, a huge amount of inclusive education discourse, it doesn't extend to teachers with disabilities. What we saw is that they really had to rely on themselves for individual resourcefulness and resilience. So this is an area where we really have to rethink or when we are producing, or when we are working with teachers with disabilities, or when we are working towards their progression. And what was something that is really, what I really felt strong is that it was important because, for example, because they didn't do this, the teachers didn't do teaching as because they had to do, or because of something that they were getting, but they saw a broader mission in the process of teaching. And this provides some powerful insights into the role that teachers with disabilities play in the mainstream sort of classrooms. And I think that's another key contribution that these teachers make into the learning of a student, giving a more holistic, broader understanding of communities and learning with differences. So finally, I would like to say this is just a summary of things what we found out. Not a summary, but like the main key things. All what we've discussed so far is very clearly and in depth discussed in the report that we produce for the British Council, and you can find it online, and it comes under the name Being a Teacher with Disabilities: Perspectives, Practices, and Opportunities. So with that, I will conclude, and my acknowledgements goes out to all the teacher participants in this study, the British Council country officers and other staff members, and the Cambridge Network for Disability and Education Research, CANDA, which we are all in, and the Faculty of Education, University of Cambridge. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada por terem se juntado a nós para ver a professora Thilanka falar sobre essa pesquisa sobre professores com deficiência. Como ela comentou, nós tivemos pessoas do Brasil respondendo essa pesquisa. Infelizmente, ela não pôde estar com a gente para fazer o nosso chat de finalização, mas eu agradeço a vocês. Se vocês quiserem saber mais sobre a pesquisa, no mesmo link do site onde vocês conseguem fazer as inscrições, vocês conseguem fazer o download dessa pesquisa também em português, se vocês quiserem saber um pouquinho mais. E lembrando a todos, para pegar o certificado, só se inscrever e no final a gente vai mandar a pesquisa. E por agora é isso, a gente vai ter um pequeno intervalo, então, antes da nossa próxima palestra, às 10 da manhã.